This is the Final Word Women's Ashes Daily, the first T20 from the Sydney Cricket Ground. At least that's where Isabelle Westbury is. I'm not there, but I'm going to defer to you in terms of vibe, in terms of atmosphere, in terms of all of the rest of those things. After I note that the show is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn, the number one plaintiff law firm in this country, the country being Australia. Izzy, could you please start, as we do on this show, by telling us about the entire match in the space of 30 seconds?
Well, Australia raced the most ridiculous total in about 3 overs. They were on, 40 or something. Georgia Voll, the debutant, Phoebe Litchfield, Beth Mooney, all these ridiculous names from Australia just scoring runs for fun. Beth Mooney, ultimately, was the difference, 75 from 51. It meant that Australia scored a mammoth total, 198 in their 20 overs. It was going to take a record score for England to chase it down. It never looked likely, especially not when their both openers were out for the Ducks. The only good thing for England, Sophia Dunkley, 59 off 30, almost as if she was playing for a different side rather than the England that she was, but otherwise they capitulated 141 all out, and it was a 57-run victory for Australia. I mean, disappointed, not surprised, but what a capitulation, in Australia win at the first time, retain the Ashes at the first time of asking. It's not great if you're an England fan, Geoff.
I don't imagine that it would be a great day if that's what you were hoping for. I mean, there's been something about these series of Australia going to getting to 8 points, and then a couple of times where England have been able to chase them down and match that. It's harder to see that happening from here, where they'd have to win the next two T20s and win the Test match. But yeah, the destination of the trophy, as much as that matters or doesn't matter, is decided in straight sets, which is kind of bizarre. This game felt like the previous ODI, where basically once Australia had finished batting, that was it. You know, it was hard to see a way for England to try to win this. And I guess if I can steal the idea that I started writing a piece about tonight, what I've kept hearing through this series is, England's best format is the T20s. You know, everybody said that before the series. Well, it'll be tough for, they'll play the ODIs first. Australia might have an advantage there, but England's best format is the T20s. And I've kept thinking, well, hang on, Australia have won 6 T20 World Cups out of 9. Like, their best format is probably also the T20s. And maybe it's also the ODIs, and maybe it's also the Tests. Like, maybe it doesn't matter. Like, if your best format is 20 over cricket, if the other side's going to be even better than you.
Well, this is it. I think that statement almost has to be reformulated to say that England's best chance is in the T20s, but that's more because T20s is a more volatile format, and just by dint of it having fewer balls and being more down to the weird quirks of cricket, they have more of a chance of beating Australia in the format. But that's very different, as you say, to it being their strongest format. And frankly, I think Australia just showed why they're number one in the world. I don't want to be demoralised, but I just have so little light in this England team right now, apart from, as we talked about, that Dunkley innings.
They look pretty dispirited. They look kind of sad at the moment, or there's a lack of energy. I was thinking about this with the younger players, the newer players that have come in. Now, I'm not gonna talk about Phoebe Litchfield's shot until we get to the Hall of Fame, because I want to hold that back. I think that needs a bit of time for itself. But the way that Georgia Voll comes in, so Elisa Healy missing tonight, little injury niggle. They're a bit worried about some hotspot in her foot. Ash Gardner missing tonight after making 100 and winning the match for them in the previous ODI. So you would think 2 pretty significant outs: your wicketkeeper, your captain, your opener, and your match winner from the previous game, who's also your best spinner. Now, if you did that to most teams, that would be a problem. But you do it to this team, and it was like it didn't even matter. Voll comes in and smacks 21 off 11. Litchfield bats at 3, makes 25 quickly off 20 balls. And by the time they're done, there's already so much momentum in the game. Beth Mooney's opening, and she's gone up through the gears as well. She's attacking. She ends up with 75 or 51. So, but it was that burst of energy from the start. And then you look at the younger inclusions for England. Bouchier came in to be energetic, and a less experienced player with less baggage at the top of the order. It hasn't worked. She hasn't really been able to make a run in the series. Freya Kemp barely got to face a ball batting down the order. Charlie Dean's, I suppose, the next on the sort of younger inclusions list, has played a bit more than the other two, but she can't remember how to bat at the moment either. So the difference between the sort of energy Australia have got from the younger players that they've brought in versus what England haven't got from the younger players they've brought in, at the same time as England's senior players haven't been able to produce much of substance.
It's not an understatement to say that in all facets of this great game of cricket, Australia are just superior to England at the moment. And we talk about, the three disciplines of bowling, batting, fielding. Well, it goes beyond that. It goes to match awareness. It goes to maturity, rotation of strike, fielding, fitness. I genuinely can't think of a single area where I say women, England are better than Australia. And frankly, it literally took 3 overs of this match for it to be gone. They talked Heather Knight, the captain, and I've got a lot of time for her as a captain. I just don't think there's many leaders around her, which is a real issue in and of itself. But she talked about this being a reset, a different format, more of a chance here for the T20s. But you'd have been forgiven for thinking that you were on a completely different planet, the way in which England started that defence, so to speak. This was their last chance saloon here and trying to keep any chance of the Ashes here. They couldn't, they were diving over balls like the London Bridge, couldn't keep the lines right, the lengths were off. Everything just seemed to be almost like capitulating in front of our eyes. And it's a real frustration. I don't think, Australia shouldn't be this superhuman different side to England. England have they've got a good domestic structure. They've got a good setup. They should be far closer than they are. And yet here we are again. The earliest opportunity. And now we're talking about whitewashes. The whole narrative about this test match was at the beginning of the series was, I hope the series is still alive. Scrap that. Now Australia will be saying, I hope they're on for the whitewash. That's what's going to attract people to the MCG when it comes to pink ball time. It's just, it's frustrating for me. The only thing to say from here is that, A, nothing to lose, and B, come the end of this series, it's probably going to be a huge overhaul, frankly. Anyway, rant over. Over to you.
And maybe there needs to be, maybe there's, and maybe it's not because anybody has not tried hard enough or because there are sort of personal failings, but maybe it's just time that some things need to change up. Maybe the energy just can't be there. There seemed to be, this England team didn't look like they were going to compete from over one of the first ODI. They looked like they were a bang average team on day one of this series. They barely made it to 200 in the first innings. They played in the 50-over games. They didn't chase 180 in the second match. And then they concede 300 in the third match. They're not a team that has been at the races. And I think there's a problem with the sort of over-egging positivity in that England team where, I'm sure, I haven't heard the presser, but I'm sure tonight it was all about how, Sophia was great and they were... And kept them in the hunt.
They were brave.
They were
brave. And
they were brave. They were never really
whatever.
But they weren't in the hunt. It wasn't. It was a brilliant innings, and she was hitting them cleanly. But she needed to make 120, not 60, if they were going to be a chance of mowing down 200 against us.
Absolutely. So and the only way in which Sophia Dunkley was able to almost play the innings that she did, and it was great. She's a hot cold player. When she's on one, she's on one. And tonight she was on one. She got a 59 from 30. It was a joy to watch, smashing sixes. But it was almost as though she had to forget that she was playing for this England team, because the moment that she started realising what a kind of awful situation they were in was the moment that it ended. So she just had to play for herself. She's also someone who's having to make a statement. She's had a really quite awful run in T20 cricket, almost a surprise inclusion in this squad, and it was very much a nothing to lose kind of innings. Not playing for England in the Ashes, but playing for herself. Brilliant, well done. But otherwise, the one thing with this England team, and Brad hadn't talked about it on the Triple M commentary, was sort of the attitude he's really quite disappointed in. And I think almost in a way that they're almost gaslighting themselves. They're telling everyone that this is the way that we play, and yes, we're playing with freedom. And it's like, well, are you playing with freedom if you have to keep on reminding everyone that you are? And I don't know. They should be grown-up professionals, and I feel like they're being treated like 10-year-old kids and being told what to say. They should be better than this. They can be better than this. And tonight just showed that. Australia are a wonderful team and well played.
The Beth Mooney piece of this I want to talk about a little bit. You can almost just not notice her because she's so bloody good. She's filling in as wicketkeeper as well, keeps well in the second innings. But to open the batting, you watch the way she bats in the ODIs, and she's a careful sort of player. She's like the firewall player. She's the one who goes, if there's a problem, I'll make 70 off 70 balls or 80 balls and just make sure that we get through. Here, she's had so many big seasons in the WBBL. We know that she is dynamic in 20-over cricket, but it's interesting just how quickly she's able to flip the switch and suddenly be a player who can peel off strings of boundaries in consecutive deliveries, who can be aggressive, who can marshal the troops around her, but who also doesn't seem like she's attacking, but rarely seems to be taking a lot of risks when she's playing out there. And you almost just take it for granted that, well, of course she made 75 or 50 balls. I mean, that's a bloody significant innings in the context of a game like this, where you've got the possibility of wrapping up the trophy and all the rest of it, and she's able to do that without her regular opening partner in Healy, and to be the most significant presence in that Australian batting card. She's
the absolute ultimate composite T20 player. I mean, there's a reason that she's ranked number one and like record number of points in the ICC rankings. I mean, her average in the format in internationals is what I think like 39-40. But what's more remarkable is that when it's against England, who arguably are, the great sort of the next best team, if you can say so. I can't believe I'm saying that right now, to Australia, but that rivalry is up there. She averages 49 or more so after tonight. She turns on her game when Australia need it most. And it was actually quite fun watching her with, Georgia Vole, and they complement each other so brilliantly. Vole 21 off 11 didn't look as though she had a care in the world, making her international T20 debut at the SCG. Hey, I can do this too. Whereas Beth Mooney just had that kind of calm collectedness, but also just so destructive. And it's almost worse. When you have somebody like a Grace Harris that comes at you and just absolutely boshes it, you kind of think, well, fair enough, they are an explosive player. But Mooney's like a sort of silent assassin. She kills you softly, and she's brilliant. And I think it's reflective of a player who had to work really hard to break into this Australian side. Because I think for years she kind of suffered that thing that keepers often do, is that she is a wicketkeeper, and therefore the only way she's going to get into the team was as a wicketkeeper. And of course, Elisa Healy was there. So she had to almost reformulate herself to say, hey, look, I can also get in just as a batter. And that took a number of years for her to get there. So by the time that she did, she was already a really great international cricketer, and she's just run from there for the last 10 years. She's absolutely brilliant, and again, I'm just upset she's Australian, frankly.
So Talia McGrath comes out and finishes it off, basically 26 off 9 balls, absolutely smokes them down the order. Grace Harris hits a massive 6 over the leg side, made 14 off 8. Georgia Wareham 11 not out towards the end, finishing it off for Australia, and then it's the leg spin duo again. Alana King just keeps on doing it in this series. 2 for 14 off her 3 overs. Wareham takes 3 for 25 after getting smacked in her first over as well. Went for 15 in her first over, and they're able to sort of take down England through the middle part. The thing that stood out to me the most. So we talked about Amy Jones and match awareness in that chase that she managed to not do a terrific job of, you might say. When
to not chase, yeah.
When she's out there. Well, yeah, to decide not to actually do the chasing herself. When she gets bowled tonight, she sort of jumps up and looks down at the pitch and goes, oh, like that one kept low. Like, what was I supposed to do about that when the ball from Georgia Wareham sneaks through her? At that point, Sophia Dunkley's already been bowled by one that kept low. Nat Sciver-Brunt's been bowled by one that kept low, both trying to play across the line. So there's a point where I'm like, were you watching? Did you watch the game before you went out to bat? Because that might have given you some indication that was a thing that could have happened, and that maybe across the line wasn't the way to go when the ball's on your stumps. There were just things like that where it seemed like, this isn't a team that's switched on at the moment.
I 100% agree. And I was almost suckered into that Amy Jones dismissal by the nature of her reaction. She was like, oh, did you see that ball? It stayed so low. And I was like, yeah, it stayed really low. And then I had next to me Cal Ferguson and Brad Haddon, and they were like, why didn't you play straight? Why did you play across the line? Like, that was completely the wrong shot to be playing. And it's true. It's almost as though England, every time they lose, it's because of a reason or an excuse that's not their fault. It's like, oh, the ball stayed low, or we were out to this ridiculous catch by Ash Gardner on the boundary, or if this tiny little thing changed, then we would have been with a chance of winning. Well, it's like, well, all right, now and again, luck can go against you. But when it starts piling up the way it is, this isn't luck. This is just, you're just being outplayed. And that's what happened. And again, with Australia, that spin duo, Georgia Wareham and Alana King, you'd almost be forgiven for thinking that they were the same kind of bowler, right? Because they're both leg spinners, but they bowl it in such a different way. And they're also rewriting the script of T20 cricket. The idea of having two leggies in the same T20 side only a couple of years ago would have been completely alien, almost unheard of. And they're saying, well, actually, no. Australia are picking on form. Alana King hasn't played a T20 match in international in 2 years, but she couldn't not be picked coming into this. So she was. Same with Kim Garth. She put up her hand in those ODIs. She wouldn't have been in the initial T20 starting lineup. They picked her on form. Grace Harris as well wasn't in the initial lineup. Scored 140 off 78 balls in the WNCL match. They're picking on form. They're picking on their best players. They don't care what the norms or the conventions are. This is an Australian team that are playing without fear. And the whole world's got a lot catching up to do.
So that's how things panned out tonight. Early wicket for Megan Shute and Kim Garth as well. The opening seamers have been able to do that. There was that brilliant bit of fielding from Elise Perry at the end to run out Sarah Glenn coming back for a second, got it back into Sutherland, who was able to take the bails off. Excellent throw after the good pick up and gather in the deep. Sutherland gets a wicket, gets Lauren Bell at the end to knock them off. Talia McGrath picks up a wicket. So basically everything that could have gone right for Australia went right. Everybody got involved. Every bowler, all of their 6 bowlers took wickets tonight. Perry hasn't had to bowl in the series, I don't think, hasn't sent down a ball that I remember acrost the ODI.
And she's been really honest about it as well. Required. That's it. She hasn't sort of said, I'm not injured or I'm not quite 100%. She's just said, listen, there's a bunch of bowlers that are bowling better than I do and what I can offer. So we're bowling them if I'm needed. Yeah, sure. And that's what's so amazing, that this Australian team are incredibly honest with themselves and with each other, whereas almost as if England are telling everybody that they're being incredibly honest when lying through their teeth the whole time, but they don't realise it. That's what the frustrating thing is. You want to shake them by the torso and be like, wake up, come on. Whoa.
There's a degree of always wanting to find a positive spin to put on it, right? But that's even if you're doing the management techniques of your praise sandwich or whatever it is, you've still got to have the bit in the middle where you actually confront the things that you're not doing well enough at. And to some degree, there's just a gulf between these teams. One stat I was really interested to notice tonight: England doesn't have a single player with a career strike rate above 130 with the bat. Australia had 5. Just as a little one to throw in there across T20 international cricket. So, Australia do have more weapons in a way, but they just seem to be playing with this degree of freedom and confidence, and they've got 2 more T20s to go, and then we'll get to the test match. But I think we've probably said what we can say about it at this stage. We should go to the Hall of Fame just after I remind people briefly that if you want to get superannuation sorted out, your pension fund, if you're from the UK, Isabelle, cbussuper.com.au. They're the ones who know what they're doing when it comes to looking after your retirement. We'll be back with the Hall of Fame. It is the final word daily. Izzy Westbury at Sydney. Can you tell me about the vibe there? It looked pretty fun tonight. There seemed a decent crowd in. How did it feel? You were wandering around on the boundary. You were chatting with people. You were doing interviews. You had a very dry chat with Sean Flegler, the national selector, who doesn't give you much, it must be said. But what was it like wandering the paint down there, or the rope down there on match night in Sydney?
I don't think Australia's national selector liked it when I said, well, your job's quite easy, isn't it? When you've got the talent that's coming through from Australia with every which way you turn.
Yeah.
Apparently that makes it harder, but
pick any 11.
I don't believe him for a second. Exactly. Whoever it is, they'll perform. No, it was good vibes. And that's what you often see with these evening T20s, school holidays, nice weather. No reason not to come down to the SCG. It's a lovely stadium for that kind of match. And it was an Australian crowd that knew that their team was on top. It was likely they were going to be entertained by the world's best, and they were. It's a young crowd as well. So, yeah, nothing not to like, to be honest. I mean, if you're on school holidays and you're in Australia in January, why wouldn't you be here, frankly?
The Phoebe Litchfield switch hit that I teased before. Now, this was supreme, and I'm trying to remember one. I can't remember a better example of this played in international women's cricket. I don't think I've seen a shot that pure. Like, you see a lot of reverses, you see a lot of reverse sweeping and so on, behind square, that kind of thing. And we see the Glenn Maxwell switch hits where he doesn't move his hands on the bat. He just switches his stance, basically, and goes backwards with the same grip. Litchfield, she's facing Sarah Glenn, loopy leg break outside the off stump. If she's playing it as a left-hander, she's trying to smack that over cover. But she shuffles down, does the full switch of the hands, top hand off, goes to the bottom of the handle, steps out, becomes a right-hander essentially, and slog sweeps it and hit it, I reckon, 8 or 10 rows back. Like, that went way into the seats. That was such a clean strike. And bloody hell, it was exciting. You know, when she tried a couple of little scoops and dinks, but when she actually nailed that one, it couldn't have been any more sweetly struck.
Oh, Geoff, I'm going to take off my sort of England kit for a second, because there are a couple of moments in this match, watching Alana King bowl, but that switch hit from Phoebe Litchfield, I got this real kind of guttural, like visceral sort of throwback, a deja vu to when I was 14, 15 years old, and for the first time I was watching Kevin Peterson come into the England side, and he pulled out, and I could almost place myself back in my young teenage body, and the first time that I saw that kind of cricket from Peterson, we just had never seen before, and that thing that kind of that lit that spark. And when I want to do that, I want to be like him. And I think that's exactly what you'd have seen in that crowd today. Was easy. I honestly, I got to put myself into a young kid and be like, yes, this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to do. Phoebe Litchfield will have inspired a generation, because it's just really cool. Like, I want to be like that. I still want to be like that, and I'm 30 something. It's awesome to watch. And this is exactly what the women's game can do.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine hitting a shot that cleanly in any conventional method, let alone turning yourself into the other-handed batter halfway down the pitch while the ball's in flight. Bizarre, amazing, beautiful. Anything else Hall of Famey that jumped out at you today?
I like Talia McGrath, who's stepping up as skipper under Healy when they needed to get Sophia Dunkley out. She went, all right, lads, I've got this, basically, and put herself on. I think the one thing I did ask, actually, Alana King, what is it in the Victorian water that means that her and Scott Boland seem to get a wicket with the first ball of their spells? It happened, it's uncanny. Tonight it happened, Boland did it all the way through the Border Gavaskar Trophy. There's something in the Victorian water, and I want to know what it is.
Oh, my favourite bit of tonight, actually, Hall of Famey, is this, just, AI working beautifully, I can only assume. If you Google Alana King and how tall she is, it tells you she's 1.96 metres tall. That's the first result on Google, which is about 6'7" if you're operating in the other money. Alana King is not 6'7". Alana King is not 5'7". Alana King comes up to Elise Perry's shoulder, and Elise Perry's not that big. So,
well, ball tracking, I reckon. One thing I would say, there was a horrendous ball tracking. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Charlie Dean who was bowling, and she's a skiddy offie.
Yeah.
And there was one point where she had someone trapped in front and went for LBW call, and the ball tracking showed it going about 2 meters over the top. It was almost as if Charlie Dean had grown to 6'7". I don't know what's going on there, but that was weird.
It was the one that was hitting it was Mooney, wasn't it? It was the left-hander, and it was hitting it was umpire.
That's a big wicket as well.
And then on the projection, it kept flying over the top, heading up to space, hopefully more successfully than some of old mate's rockets that keep blowing up every time he puts them in the air. All right. I think that's it. I think we're done. I think this has been the final word. The Women's Ashes Daily. Izzy Westbury, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back. We've got 2 more T20s to go, and then I'll see you in Melbourne for the Test match. And like you say, the only story, it may be whitewash at that point. England have got to try to turn that around. Let's see what happens on Wednesday, one of those days.
Wednesday it is. No, Thursday it is. Oh, my God. The train just keeps on going. Not always with England on board, mind you, but,
All right, it doesn't stop. We will not stop either, because we cannot and we will not. Thanks to CBUS Super and Maurice Blackburn. If you want to find out more about the show, patreon.com/thefinalword. That's the Daily. See you later.